Mark, sometimes you don't need analytical data to tell you the story. Just look at the situation, find the trend, and make the decision.
Tyler Boyd's dip in production last year better correlates with Andy Dalton being off the field than it does with A.J. Green being off the field, despite public perception.
You can't watch just highlight film because highlight film only shows the good things. Watch the player's actual game tape because you see the good and the bad.
In 7 games in 2018, where all 3 starting Rams receivers were healthy, Brandon Cooks led the trio in targets, receptions, receiving yards, and total PPR points by a considerable margin.
It's a beautiful day for football. Welcome into the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast. I'm Chris McConnell.
I'm Mark Wemkin.
And we are the RotoBros. Mark, not only are we the RotoBros, we are also ready for playoff time because the majority of our listeners are starting their fantasy playoffs this week. This is week 1 of the fantasy playoffs for most people. Some people actually started last week, but they're gonna listen like they're starting this week. So tough news for them. So we are starting we're kicking off our playoff primer here for the first episode, or for the first week, of the fantasy football playoffs. Hopefully the majority of you, hopefully all of you, have made the playoffs. So we are going to get into a lot of good things today. We've got a jam-packed show, really. So we got to get you guys ready for the playoffs because, Mark, the number one goal here is so that everybody can make the playoffs and finish with that fantasy hardware.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot to talk about, honestly. With playoffs starting, we got a bunch of big news this past week. We know Ron Rivera was fired. We have a lot to talk about, man. And we got to jam in a bunch of stuff regarding the playoffs here, too. I know specifically I really want to talk about Tyler Lockett.
That has been a huge discussion point in FSA this week. So yeah, we're gonna dive into Tyler Lockett a little bit because there's a ton of people that are wondering: do I start him? Do I sit him? Do I trust him? What do I do with Tyler Lockett? So we're gonna answer those questions for him as well.
Yeah, that sounds good to me, man. Yeah, just looking at the show sheet here, you've got some news and notes, mostly injury news. We've got Julio set to return. I really wasn't concerned about him missing. You're not sitting Julio Jones. He hasn't been like elite, but he hasn't been anywhere near bad enough to sit. He has not been what Tyler Lockett's been the last 3 weeks.
Yeah, no, and they already said, even Dan Quinn said earlier this week that had the game last week been on Sunday, Julio probably would have played. It just wasn't enough time, unfortunately, especially in a lost season for the Falcons. It just wasn't enough time for him to get on the field, so he didn't play with the shoulder injury, so he nursed that for an extra few days, but he should be back on the field, like Mark mentioned, on Sunday, so that's going to be good for a lot of fantasy lineups. A couple guys that are not, they're labeled questionable right now, but they're on the more doubtful side of questionable. James Conner, Juju Smith-Schuster, neither one of them is really expected to play. James Conner could play if he gets in some, miracle practice time this week. But it's definitely not looking that way. He still hasn't taken the practice field. I don't expect him to take the practice field tomorrow either. So James Conner and Juju look like they're going to be out as well. Daniel Jones was a surprising name added to the injury report today because he's got a high ankle sprain. He's actually in a walking boot right now. So guess what, Mark? Eli's back. Eli's going to be starting for us on Monday Night Football. What do you think about that?
It's interesting to me. My thing with Eli Manning is the first person you think of, like, who this impacts. This impacts Evan Ingram. This impacts Golden Tate, Sterling Shepard, but this impacts Saquon Barkley. But it kind of raises the question: is anybody that drafted Saquon Barkley in the playoffs?
That's a good point. I drafted Saquon Barkley in a couple leagues, but I'm not in the playoffs in those leagues.
Nope,
the ones
either.
that I have him in, it's a dynasty league, so it's not redraft.
No, in all of my my best ball championship teams too, the ones where I have Saquon in the first round, I didn't advance. I didn't even make it into the playoffs. So with Saquon Barkley, if you're in the playoffs and you've owned Saquon all year, I think you're pretty lucky.
Dalvin Cook has been a big story because he went down the other night as well and did not end up finishing the game. But he said after the game that the shoulder injury that he suffered is not serious and he expects to play. He told everyone today he is playing this week. So Dalvin Cook looks to be playing. But we're going to get into a little bit of Dalvin Cook, Alex Madison here in a little bit when we get to one of our other segments. So that's a big one, and that could have a lot of impact, but there's a lot of strategy involved in that as well. Mark and I have hit on that in a previous episode as well, but if you didn't hear that, we'll go ahead and cover that as well. Austin Hooper, though, some good news. Austin Hooper is practicing today. He practiced on Monday, and he practiced on Tuesday. So he has practiced 3 days this week. That looks very, very good for his prospects of suiting up on Sunday. He is labeled as questionable right now, but the number one fantasy tight end for the majority of the season is Austin Hooper, and he should be back in fantasy lineups just in time for week 1 of the fantasy playoffs. Look, this is a guy, he is ranked he's the number 4 overall tight end right now, Mark, and he hasn't played since week 10. So that's how good his season's been.
Oh, he was amazing. He was fantastic. I was very overweight in best ball because he was so cheap. I didn't get him in redraft because I was hammering the button on George Kittle every time. And Evan Ingram. I had a lot of Evan Ingram, and that is one guy that cannot play through injuries. I'll tell you that. That's something I learned from one of my buddies at TQE, John Proctor. He literally called that. The second Evan Ingram gets hurt, he's done. He cannot play through injuries, and it's just been brutal with Evan Ingram. But with Austin Hooper, man, this is good news, and I think it's good news for Matt Ryan owners too. And the thing with Austin Hooper is it's not like the Saquon scenario. You are probably in the playoffs thanks in part to Austin Hooper because he was so good for such a large chunk of the year that this is important. This is definitely going to have fantasy playoff implications. Austin Hooper coming back.
Yeah, speaking of Evan Ingram, going back to him for a second, he is expected to play as well. So he and Golden Tate should be back on the field. Unfortunately, like we mentioned a minute ago, they will not have Daniel Jones. They will have Eli Manning. So if Eli Manning is on your free agent wire, so go pick him up and win a championship with Eli Manning. Not going to happen. But let's get to the big news real quick, Mark, because this was seemingly out of nowhere. I think a lot of people really maybe expected it to happen after the season, but Ron Rivera has been fired. The former head coach of the Carolina Panthers. He has been fired. Vegas has they have tagged Jim Harbaugh as the candidate with the highest odds of being hired with the Panthers. So we'll see how that turns out. I think that would be a solid hire. But this could be interesting because this could have a domino effect. Because Ron Rivera getting fired could mean that the Turner father and son, Norv Turner and his son, could be looking for jobs elsewhere outside of Carolina. That would not be a good thing for the fantasy prospects of Christian McCaffrey. Now, McCaffrey's going to be fantastic, no matter what system he's in, but Norv Turner clearly was able to get the most out of him in his tenure there, and since McCaffrey has been a Panther. So this is great. I mean, Christian McCaffrey has been fantastic the last couple of years. Pretty much been the best running back in football. But this could have some serious effects on the future of Christian McCaffrey in 2020 and beyond, depending on who they hire as head coach.
Are you nervous at all that Norv Turner taking a different role with the team after Ron Rivera got fired? He to my knowledge, he's not the offensive coordinator anymore. He took a new role. I believe it's assistant to the head coach or something.
Yeah, assistant to the head coach.
Assistant to the head coach. I mean, I'm sure he's still going to have plenty of influence on the offense, but do you think with a new offensive coordinator, the usage could flow differently, especially with the Panthers being 5-7? They're on the outside looking in. Going forward, they're not going to have a ton to play for. I haven't looked at the standings. I haven't looked at the brackets, but if they get mathematically eliminated next week or even the week following, we might have cause for concern with Christian McCaffrey's usage.
Yeah, for me, Mark, I'm not going to be worried about Christian McCaffrey for the fantasy, but for the rest of this season, I'm treating him as normal. I'm not letting Ron Rivera getting fired scare me away from Christian McCaffrey. I think McCaffrey's going to be fine. I think he's going to, for the most part, he's going to be the fantasy MVP for most teams, if not overall. And so I think he's going to be just fine. I don't think he's going to skip a beat here in the fantasy playoffs, but I think for the future, there could be some concern. There may not be, I think as of right now, going into next year, Christian McCaffrey would probably be the consensus number 1 overall pick. There might be some discussion somewhere, but I think for the most part, it would be McCaffrey. This could maybe change a little bit.
Yeah, I think going forward, into next year, it could change. For the most part, I'm with you. I just felt that was something we needed to touch on. While we're with the Carolina Panthers here, DJ Moore. Is it safe to call him a league winner yet?
I don't want to put him in that Michael Thomas league winner category.
No. As far as league winners go, I think those are two completely different categories. Michael Thomas was a back end of the first, early second round draft pick. Whereas, I mean, DJ Moore is a wide receiver one in fantasy that you got in the 5th round. That is league winner.
About more of a value league winner. Yeah, absolutely. Then I would totally agree to that.
Yeah.
Now, I think a little bit of things can change because I was asked a lot of questions in FSA today about DJ Moore, and I think even a couple in the RotoBros Patreon chat about DJ Moore. And you got to start DJ Moore, I think, almost no matter what, depending on who your options are. But I think if there's an opportunity here, I think with the uncertainty moving into 2020 with Cam Newton, and Kyle Allen's not the answer. So what is the point? You're not making the playoffs. What is the point in, quote, seeing what you have in Kyle Allen? You know what you have in Kyle Allen. He can be a quality backup in this league, but he's not your future. So why not see if somebody like Will Grier is your future? There's some talk about Will Grier actually being the starting quarterback this week, or Kyle Allen having a very, very short leash against Atlanta this week, and Will Grier possibly making an appearance. If that's the case, I think that could affect DJ Moore a little bit. So people want to probably keep an eye on that news. But I'm not. It's kind of like the Christian McCaffrey thing. Like, I'm not. Even if it's Will Grier over Kyle Allen at any point, I'm still not going to panic. I'm starting my guys, which is a little bit of foreshadowing to a discussion we're going to have a little bit later. But he's an example. Like, I'm not benching DJ Moore unless I'm like trotting out Michael Thomas, Chris Godwin, and Mike Evans. I don't know. Like, I'd have to have some pretty damn good options to be benching DJ Moore at this point in the season.
I am torn here because I do agree with you. I do agree that it makes more sense for the Carolina Panthers to see what they have in Will Grier instead of letting him sit on the bench. We know what Kyle Allen is, but I mean, this is we're getting into football theory here, and this is a fantasy show. I am playing DJ Moore regardless. He's got a 28% target share since the start of week 6. That is 4th most in the NFL among wide receivers, behind just DeAndre Hopkins, Devontae Adams, and Michael Thomas. Like, he's got 130 fantasy points over that span. That's more than Julian Edelman. That's more than Jarvis Landry. That is 8 fewer than Mike Evans, 5 more than Tyreek Hill. He was hurt. That is 25 more than Allen Robinson, more than Courtland Sutton, more than Keenan Allen, more than OBJ. Like, this is insane. He's only got 5 fewer points than DeAndre Hopkins, 26 fewer points than Michael Thomas.
Yeah, well, he's 5th at the wide receiver position in targets. The only receivers in the league that are ahead of him are, of course, Michael Thomas, of course, Julian Edelman, of course, DeAndre Hopkins, and then Mike Evans, who outpaces him by a large amount of a total of 1 reception.
I was going to say,
target.
Since week 6, Michael Thomas only has 1 more target than DJ Moore.
It's incredible, and this is what we said. We said this. I think it was around the week 7, week 8 episode. Hey, DJ Moore the last few weeks is one of the most targeted wide receivers in the league. Like, he is getting they are using him in a perfect complementary receiving role to Christian McCaffrey. Christian McCaffrey, obviously the offense runs through him, but when the defense is playing soft, DJ Moore is just eating them alive, especially with the run after the catch. So this is definitely an offense that is, man, it is just dangerous, man. Like, it's unfortunate that Norv Turner's probably not going to be there, but what he has done with this offense is really nothing short of incredible. DJ Moore is obviously turning into an alpha, not just an alpha number 1 wide receiver in the NFL, and he quite possibly could end up in 2 years. We could be saying he's absolutely the best wide receiver out of that draft class. I think we need to give Calvin a little bit more time, with Julio on the back end of his career, Christian Kirk with, some more improvements on that Arizona offense without a rookie quarterback this time. But DJ Moore certainly, I think,
don't forget Courtland Sutton front. Too, man.
Courtland Sutton. Yeah. Courtland Sutton's another guy as well. We're going to mention him a little bit later as well. It's unbelievable class. And when that class fully declared, and we're sitting there watching tape on this class, I'm thinking, man, this might be a better class than what we saw a few years ago with Odell and Allen Robinson and Jarvis Landry. And I mean, you could just go on for hours, it seems, with that class. Right. So this one could end up being better.
It really could be. Here's a question for you. Let's say we're in a dynasty league with no trade deadline. I'm not in one of those, but I want to be in one where I can make a trade in the playoffs. Like, especially if I'm eliminated. Like last year, I had Damian Williams, but was not in the playoffs. I was not able to sell him, which was irritating. I understand why. I understand why there are no trade deadlines, or why there are trade deadlines rather in dynasty leagues. I get it. I just wish I was in some leagues where there weren't, so I could capitalize on peak value like that. Anyway, where I was going with this. Let's say you're in a dynasty league with no trade deadline. You are trying to rebuild. You have a ton of draft picks and a ton of like super young players. You know, you have a foundation for a rebuild. How much are you willing to pay for DJ Moore?
Oh man, I'll give up at least 2 first-round picks. I'd give up 2 first-round picks for him.
I think the bidding would start at 2 first-round picks.
That's probably because obviously he's worth more than a first, so you'd have to start at 2 first-round picks. So, I mean, 2 first-round picks and a player for an elite wide receiver. And here's the thing, like for the dynasty players here, and we'll talk more about that as the offseason rolls along when we get into more of the dynasty sort of, we put more spotlight on dynasty this offseason. But one of the things for me is I'm willing to pay more, especially in dynasty, for a high-quality elite wide receiver because you can trust them more. They're not getting as hurt. They're not as high risk of a position as something like running back. Like, okay, I'll pay for a Saquon Barkley or a Christian McCaffrey or an Ezekiel Elliott, but I'm not going to pay. I'm not going to, even as much as I love him, I'm not going to overpay for Phillip Lindsay. You know, I'm not going to overpay for Mark Ingram. I'm not going to overpay for Leonard Fournette. I'm just not going to do that. Aaron Jones, even Chris Carson, who's been a RotoBros favorite this year. Like, I'm not going to pay that sort of 2 first-round picks for that price because I can go out and I can get 2 Josh Jacobs. I can get a Josh Jacobs and a David Montgomery for the price of a Chris Carson, Leonard Fournette. I'll take the Josh Jacobs, David Montgomery package all day long. Like, these receivers typically take a little bit more time to burst onto the scene. With running backs, you can replenish them a lot faster. They're an easy position to replenish. It's like in fantasy basketball, point guard. Guard as a whole is a very easy position to replenish. It's the running back of fantasy. It's so deep and there's so many options and it's so easy to fill. And running backs that same way in fantasy football. Like I can't wrap my mind around people giving up 2 or even 3 first-round picks in dynasty, and maybe even on top of a player for a single running back. I'm more willing to do something like that for an elite wide receiver like Michael Thomas or someone like that I know I'm going to be able to get years and years of high quality production out of.
It was like a simple 1-sentence question and answer, Chris.
It's never that simple with me. I gotta go into it. I gotta get into it. When we talk dynasty, man, I gotta dig deep.
I am not looking forward to dynasty podcasts with you. I'm gonna have to I'm gonna have to put like a shock collar on you, and every time you go on a tangent, just bzzz.
Yeah, you'll be able to watch Pulp Fiction by the time the Dynasty podcasts are over. You'll be able to fit in Pulp Fiction, maybe even like Django Unchained. You'll be able to go through like back to back, and then we'll finally get to the end of the podcast.
Django Unchained was a really good movie. All right, man. I think I got what I wanted because I kind of agree with you. The bidding is going to start at 2 first-round picks and then maybe even a player.
Imagine his value going into 2020. Like, think of DJ Moore is legit going to be, depending on who's at quarterback.
Well, there's already people talking about how he's a top 5 dynasty receiver. I don't have him in my top 5, but he's very close. I still value Juju Smith-Schuster higher, and I am in the minority there.
Oh,
and
well,
all that tells me is that it is Juju Smith-Schuster is the easiest buy low, their most obvious and most easily recognizable buy low in dynasty history. And I'm just going to leave it at that. Chris, we got to talk about the playoffs, dude, because I need to talk something out with you. We already talked about it a little bit, but in like 4 leagues where I am in the playoffs and like I have had genuinely good years, I didn't just squeak in. This guy has been a staple. What do I do with Tyler Lockett? I am not going to let this guy cost me a freaking championship. Like, what do I do with this guy?
Hey, if it's me, I'm gonna tell you right now, I'm trusting him, and I've told everybody this week, trust Tyler Lockett. Now, of course, look, like we just mentioned, if you're trotting out Michael Thomas, who you got in the first round, and you're trotting out Chris Godwin, who you got in the fourth, fifth, sixth round, and then you got a third guy, maybe you got you doubled up on Tampa Bay receivers, you got Mike Evans too. I don't know. If you are trotting out guys like that, then okay, bench Tyler Lockett. I get it. But this is a guy that was coming off a 30-point game he was coming off a 13 catch game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
It's the biggest game of his career.
Yeah, biggest game of his career. Yeah, 18 targets.
Yeah. His usage was insane. Weeks 1 through 9, 2.3 yards per route run. Since then, 0.72 yards per route run on 9 targets. DK Metcalf, over that span, leads the team with 23 targets. Tyler Lockett has seen 9.
Yeah. He had a 30-point game in week 9 against Tampa, and he's followed that up with a sub 3-point game right above a 3-point game, and then he just put up a donut against Minnesota. So
I couldn't believe that. I had Dalvin Cook and Tyler Lockett going in that game. It was the last week of the season, and I finished in first with the highest score. So I wasn't concerned, but like I had Tyler Lockett in that game, and I had Dalvin Cook going in that game. Tyler Lockett puts up a goose egg, and Dalvin Cook leaves before the half hurt. Like I thought hell had frozen over. I was freaking out.
So yeah, I mean, I'm not panicking on him because I think he is due for a solid game, a pivotal divisional matchup, prime time. I think Tyler Lockett's going to show up this week. Now I'm not saying he's going to, go, he's going to catch, 9 balls for 152 yards and, 2 scores, but I could legitimately see him having 8 to 9 targets, 93 yards and a score. I think he has a pretty solid game, and I think he's going to be worth the wait and kick off the fantasy playoffs nicely for a lot of people. I have to trust him in several leagues, and I'm doing so. I'm one of those guys, I'm going to start my guys. I'm going to trust my best players more often than not. And of course, there's some gray area there, which we'll probably get into here in a little bit. But for the most part, I'm starting my guys. Tyler Lockett, to me, is still one of those guys as a high-end wide receiver too this year. He is a guy that I'm not really panicking on. You can look, he's had 3 rough games. I get it. Cooper Kupp just came off 2 or 3 rough games as well, and he got it together this past week. Tyler Lockett is due for a big bounce back game. And look, the coaching staff knows that. They're going to try to get him the football. Okay. They're going to try to get him the football. We'll see where Jalen Ramsey's coverage ends up. Is it going to be on DK? Will it be on Lockett? Who knows? But
I think it'll go to DK. Okay. I think the Ramsey coverage, and Ramsey, let me tell you something. The producer man is right. Jalen Ramsey has not been good this year. Do I still think Jalen Ramsey is an elite corner? Yes. This is the first year in his career where he's going to allow a passer rating when targeted over like 77. And I know the producer man's going to come in after editing this and be like, well, actually, the highest he's ever allowed is 76 point. And just, all right. But I would assume Jalen Ramsey is going to stay on the perimeter and he's going to shadow DK Metcalf. I think that's what makes the most sense. Will he follow guys to the slot? Yeah. He played 39 slot snaps in week 10, so it's possible that Jalen Ramsey could follow Tyler Lockett to the slot. I'm looking at that game right now, just trying to figure out, like, is there going to be some throwing in this game? Is this going to be a high-paced game? Do I really want to trust Tyler Lockett? Right now, this game's got a total of 46.5. The Rams are 1-point home favorites. That one doesn't compute to me. The Seahawks opened at 2.5-point favorites, and now they're 1-point underdogs. Yeah, I think, like, I don't want to bench Tyler Lockett. I just want to play him.
Yeah, and look, this is a guy he's had a pretty solid season. And for the most part, he's been consistent. They have got to get him going. Seattle's been fine these last 3 games without him, obviously, going 3-0. But I do think that they are going to have to eventually start getting him more involved because, look, I get it. DK's evolution is very important, and he is doing an excellent job of developing in that system. They are doing a great job of using him to his strengths. He makes his mistakes here and there, but I don't think them getting DK even more involved is necessarily hurting Tyler Lockett, because I think it may hurt him a little bit, but not to this extent. Like, this is just, I think it's just one of those anomalies, like one of those things that happens. I don't think it was Cooper Kupp's fault that he just went through a rut. It just happens. Guys go through ruts, unless your name's Michael Thomas. You go through ruts, like you go through these, you have these down games. And Tyler Lockett's not a full-fledged wide receiver one that you have to expect, top-end value every single week. But I do think that you're going to have to, people are going to have to, they've had to be patient the last 3 weeks. So I think going into the playoffs, I think he's going to have a solid game. I'm confident. I'm going to stick with them. Now, if he doesn't after this week, if I'm still alive, then I'm going to have to think twice about, starting him against Carolina next week in a possible semifinals matchup for a lot of people. But I think for the most part, Tyler Lockett's going to be just fine. I think this offense is obviously just fine. They're going to look his way more. They're going to get him more involved, just like the Rams did with Cooper Kupp. And I mentioned Cooper Kupp a lot because I think it's very what's the word I'm looking for, Mark?
I don't know what word you're looking for, but you mentioned Cooper Kupp. I think that's a good transition to do another guy I want to talk about. What about Robert Woods? What about teams that have Robert Woods on their roster that just squeaked into the playoffs? Like, are you playing him next week?
I think it would depend on who I have. Like, I'm not. I'm just not huge on Robert Woods, like trusting Robert Woods. I would hope that I have better options. But if it's between
he's
like
seen
Robert
39
Woods
targets over the last 4 weeks, 31% target share, 41% of the air yards.
He's definitely getting the looks. If it's between Big Mike Williams and Robert Woods, I'll go Robert Woods. But if it's between Tyler Lockett and Robert Woods, I'm going to lean Tyler Lockett this week. And so
I don't know about that.
That's where I'm at. That's where I'm at. I'm confident. I'm rolling with Lockett.
This usage that Robert Woods is seeing, he saw 19 targets in week 13. He saw ridiculous usage. But even before that, in weeks 10 through 12, 25% target share, 42% of the air yards, 252 air yards actually. So he was getting usage. In games that are going to be more back and forth, that are going to be more tick-tacky, like we can project the pace of this game in week 14 to be against Seattle. That game could have a decent pace. It really could. Those are the games where Robert Woods is going to thrive. And if he's seeing a 25% target share in that game environment with a decent total and a good implied team total, I want to play Robert Woods. If you're asking me right now, like I already said that I want to play Tyler Lockett, and that's fine. But if you're asking me right now, like if I have both on my roster, I think I'm playing Robert Woods.
Well, we're going to see how that turns out because I'm playing Lockett. But I'm not going to blame anybody for, looking at the last 3 weeks of Lockett and deciding not to roll the dice. I get that. But I just think with
$10 bet Robert Woods versus Tyler Lockett in week 14.
All right, I'll go Tyler Lockett. Wait, week 14 or? Yeah, we're in week 14. What am I thinking? I'm still thinking we're in week 13.
All right.
Yeah, week 14 it is.
All right,
14 it is.
Do you want an injury clause or no? I don't need one.
Nah, we won't do an injury clause.
All right, it's on.
All right. Everybody's going to hear next week who wins this bet.
Gentleman's agreement.
Gentleman's agreement. Hey, Mark, how are your fantasy teams doing? Because right now, I think that we want to give the listeners a little bit of kind of some insight. Like we talk about like wanting to help them, succeed in their playoffs and get them their fantasy hardware, but they probably want to know how we're doing in our season-long leagues as well. And I'll let you know right now, I'm in 17 leagues. I know that might be a shock to a lot of people, but it is a lot of work. But I made the playoffs in 12, so I'm like at 70% or so. 6 of those, though, are Dynasty. I'm a huge Dynasty guy, so 6 of those are Dynasty. And for the entire year, like my biggest league, dude, I was number 1 in the from week 1 all the way to week 13. Number 1 in the league. However, I lost last week of the season to a division rival who was number 2, and now I have dropped to 2nd in the division, and now I'm the 3 seed because I didn't, both division winners get the first 2 seeds. So I have a pretty tough matchup in the opening round. But I'm telling you right now, man, you want to know who I need healthy? I need Hooper and I need James Conner. I need them in my lineup this week so bad for this matchup. I don't think I'm going to have James Conner, it sounds like, but hopefully I can get Austin Hooper in there.
Yeah, that sure would be nice. I mean, I need Austin Hooper in a few spots, especially in best ball. As far as like my redraft season long teams, I had a good year. I had a much better year than I did last year. Last year was one of my worst years ever. I had so much Jamal Williams, it was disgusting. This year I've been better. I was heavy on Lamar Jackson in both best ball and redraft. I was heavy on Devin Singletary when he was still a value. You know, I was the guy pounding the table. Once he was a 6th round pick, do not draft this guy. But when you were getting him in the 14th round, I had him on like all of my teams. He was like an auto draft. So I do have a lot of Devin Singletary, who another guy we could be talking about 4 weeks from now as a potential league winner. Over the last
foreshadowing, folks.
Yes, sir. Over the last 5 weeks, he's played at least 66% of the snaps in every game. His snap share has increased in every game, and it hit its ceiling last week. He played 77% of the snaps against Dallas. And this was a game that Buffalo was winning from start to finish. Like, he is just about game script proof. And against Baltimore, a lot of people are saying sit him. I love the pace of play in this game, to be honest with you. I love the pace we can project for this game. And I do think Buffalo is going to be trailing. They're 5.5 point home dogs right now to Baltimore.
I can't wait for this game.
I think it's going to be fun.
Not even for the fantasy aspect. Like, I just cannot wait to watch the Bills. And like, everybody was talking about Ravens, 49ers. And I get it. It lived up to the hype. But man, I'm telling you,
that was a really
Josh
good game.
Allen, Lamar Jackson, these two teams are built like identically. I am so excited to watch this game. And Devin Singletary's not seeing my bench. I am so high on Devin Singletary for the future. It's not even funny. Like, I think this guy next season is absolutely in the conversation to finish as a top 10 running back. I'm so excited for him. I can't even put it into words. I really think that this is going to be a guy that is going to end the season probably as a very rock solid RB1 in 2020. Now, obviously, that's jumping way ahead. We don't know what's going to happen until then. But if I had to like sort of project what Devin Singletary will be this time next year, man, I just think he's going to be an every week must start.
I agree with you. As long as he's seeing the snap share he's seen a 12% target share over the last 5 games where his snap share has really skyrocketed. That's the type of usage you like to see, especially in a rookie. I would love to see the Bills offense as a whole progress before I really give Singletary a vote of confidence. Singletary, the player, I agree with you. And he was such a good guy to mention, in my opinion, because I do think he's going to be on a lot of playoff rosters. And I do think he is in contention for like league winner, like labeled as a league winner at the end of the year. So I'm really interested in him. In this game, honestly, against this Baltimore and Buffalo game, like I said, Buffalo is a 5.5 point road dog right now. The range of outcomes for this game is just so high. Baltimore could go into Buffalo and blow the doors off of them. Baltimore could go into Buffalo and get knocked in the dirt because the Bills defense is elite. It is at worst the 3rd best defense in the NFL, and at best it is the best. So the range of outcomes for this game is just so high. And if you're asking me to pick right now, I am picking Lamar Jackson and the Ravens. Would I be at all shocked if Josh Allen won this football game?
Absolutely not.
No, I wouldn't be. No, and that's not because I think Josh Allen is transcending into a franchise quarterback. I do think Josh Allen is good. There's a lot of things in his game that I still think need another step. He has taken a step. He has taken that step that I thought Mitchell Trubisky took, but he never did. There is still another step to take for Josh Allen. But honestly, I've liked what I've seen. And from a fantasy perspective, this guy is still a world beater. He's still running. He's still scoring touchdowns on the ground. He is still a high leverage passer, a guy that loves to chuck the ball downfield. So Josh Allen is another guy that should be on a lot of playoff rosters. If you're in a league where you've been streaming quarterbacks over the last season or so, are you comfortable playing Josh Allen in this matchup week 1 of the playoffs?
100%. I've gotten so many questions about Josh Allen. Josh Allen or Sam Darnold. I'm starting. We love Sam Darnold the rest of the year. I love Josh Allen. This is a Josh Allen matchup. I am absolutely wanting to play Josh Allen in this game, and I am deploying him every single play. I'm not thinking twice about it. He's QB9 on the year. Well, what has he done to where you cannot trust him? This is not the 2000 Ravens defense. He's going to be fine. He's at home. This is a pivotal AFC playoff game. Like,
well, you know the thing with the Bills though, you want Josh Allen in games where they're going to be trailing. You want to play Josh Allen in games where they are a dog. He is a home dog right now. You could not ask for a better game environment against a team that is leading the NFL in plays per game. You could not ask for a better game environment for Josh Allen to have one of those monstrous Josh Allen games where he is trailing the whole time, but scores 4 total touchdowns and 2 of them on the ground.
Oh, I could use it. And he would probably be crowned my fantasy MVP this year because I've got him as a quarterback in so many leagues, even my most important league that I was just telling you about. Like, I think he would probably overall be my fantasy MVP if I'm looking at all positions. But who are the fantasy MVPs for your team? Like, and I'm not talking about like Christian McCaffrey, obviously. Like, let's go with some more non-obvious ones. Like, I don't have any shares with Christian McCaffrey, but if I did, obviously McCaffrey's going to be my fantasy MVP. Who's somebody that you have a ton of shares that has just been rock solid for you all year? Because I've got 2 names right off the bat. Number 1 for me, Mark, has obviously been Chris Carson. He has been dynamite all season long. So he would probably get my top, fantasy MVP vote, I think. And then Mark Ingram is another one for me. I've got him everywhere, and it's not like Mark Ingram. He's RB12 right now, I believe, on the season, or RB13. I think he was like going as RB12 before the season goes. So he's like right where he's right at the expectation for him. I think that Ingram really, when I saw that he had signed with the Ravens, there wasn't a better place. We knew they were going to be the most run heavy team in the league, which they are, and we knew that he was going to be a bell cow for this team, which he is. Like they've gotten Justice Hill and they've gotten Gus Edwards, but Mark Ingram has really done everything that we thought he was going to do this year, and he has really helped out. Aside from the more obvious choices on my fantasy rosters, Mark Ingram has definitely been one of those guys that I would lean on. So my top 3 would be Josh Allen, Chris Carson, and of course Mark Ingram. So those would be my 3 guys. But for you, Mark, who are the fantasy MVPs for your team? The not too obvious ones. I'm glad you said Chris Carson because I think we need to have a small conversation about him as well. I would say my fantasy MVPs, I'll give you 3. Lamar Jackson. I have as much Lamar Jackson as you have Josh Allen. Yeah. I have as much Lamar, if not more. I have so much Lamar Jackson. Remember in right before week 1 when you drafted that team for me on ESPN and I literally texted you, I trust you, but you're drafting Lamar Jackson. I remember that.
Yeah.
I did.
Yeah,
I drafted Lamar Jackson. I remember that. I wish I could go back. I need to go back and find that text, actually.
That team is actually doing pretty well, honestly. That team finished 8-5. I'm in the playoffs. I finished 2nd in scoring. That was actually my cousin's money league, and he destroyed everybody. He won the scoring title by 300 points. I kid you not, 300 points. He scored more than everybody else. It's insane. I know he had Christian McCaffrey. I don't remember who. Michael Thomas. He has Michael Thomas too. So he had Christian McCaffrey and Michael Thomas. His team was insane. So Lamar Jackson's the obvious one. I want to say Dalvin Cook because I don't think a lot of people. He wasn't supposed to be what he is. You know, a lot of people said like, oh, I saw Dalvin Cook coming. And yeah, maybe some people did. But a lot of people faded him, number 1, for his offensive line, and number 2, because of the injury risk. I have Dalvin Cook everywhere. I was an advocate for him all summer. I was posting film threads. I was I wouldn't shut up about Dalvin Cook. He's a big one. And for wide receiver, DJ Moore. We already talked about him, but DJ Moore has another guy that I am just so disgustingly overweight on in redraft. I drafted him everywhere. I could not believe I was getting him in the 5th and 6th round. And you know what? Let me give you guys one more because this is a Mark Wemkin guy, another guy that I was adamant all summer about drafting because he was a value in the 6th round, had an ADP somewhere around wide receiver 13 or wide receiver 33. And he is a top 20 wide receiver right now, and that's Allen Robinson.
Yeah, Allen Robinson, and you remember in the early days of the RotoBros Fantasy Football Podcast.
Oh, I remember how you feel about Allen Robinson.
I was not.
You're not going to get away with any lies here.
No, and I'm not trying to. I was not huge on Allen Robinson this year. I really thought that this was the year that Anthony Miller was going to take a step forward. Now, I don't really necessarily know if it's Anthony Miller's fault that it just hasn't happened. Now, these last 2 weeks, let me tell you, could we be seeing something going into 2020? Perhaps. I still love Anthony Miller. He's a hell of a talent.
Yeah, it's 100% not Anthony Miller and 100% the quarterback. So there's another. I think the buy low window is closing because of the usage he's seen over the last 2 weeks.
Let's blame it all on Mitch. It's too easy.
Where's the lie? Exactly.
Le'Veon Bell not getting the usage. Blame it on Mitch Trubisky.
Oh yeah, damn it, Trubisky.
Ridiculous. Oh, Aaron Jones. You can't trust Aaron Jones going into the playoffs. Mitch Trubisky.
That's Matt LaFleur. That's Matt LaFleur. Fire Matt LaFleur to the moon.
Ooh.
Put him in a rocket, send him to the moon.
I don't know about that, Mark. Let's not go over our heads here. But yeah, so those would be. I think it was good to kind of give a little bit of insight on what we've done as far as the success of our teams this year. So, I don't think I'm the number one seed on like any of my leagues this year, but I've made the playoffs again, 70% of them, 12 out of 17. So I'm happy about that. Much better year than like last year was a good season for me. 2017 was horrible. 2018 was good, but I didn't make the playoffs in a lot of leagues. I just hit on a lot of my takes. But 2019, I mean, it has been an excellent season in both of those areas. So thrilled about 2019. So hopefully I can bring home that hardware. So and I would suspect that, of course, the team I drafted for you is going to bring home the hardware as well. So I know you're excited about that. So I'll take a cut of whatever you make on that. So
eat me.
So
not going to happen. You won't see a dime. In fact, you owe me money for letting you draft one of my teams.
It's the Lamar Jackson tax. I'm taxing you. The Lamar Jackson tax.
I'm taxing you because this team would not be where it's at without Lamar Jackson. You drafted Devonta Freeman when I deliberately told you not to draft Devonta Freeman.
I couldn't help it. It was such a good spot, and obviously it didn't work
Donk.
out. So that's one of the takes that just did not work out this year. Okay, so speaking of guys that didn't work out, this past week, this was a make or break week 13 for a lot of teams. Like they had to make the playoffs. They needed their guys to come through. And Mark, some of these guys that did not come through, we got to discuss real quick. And we've discussed them a little bit. Michael Thomas. Now, we've given him all this praise for what he's done this year, and he's incredible. And he'll be the first receiver off the board in 2020. But Michael Thomas ruining the week of a lot of fantasy players in week 13. If you had Michael Thomas on your fantasy team and you didn't make the playoffs because you didn't make the play, it's probably because of Michael Thomas. 4.8 points is what he scored in PPR. So less than 5. That's definitely not Michael Thomas scoring that obviously you are used to. That was easily his lowest scoring game of the season, and it came at the worst possible time, Mark. So he's a guy that disappoints people. Tyreek Hill's a guy that disappoints some people as well. Aaron Jones, which is a guy that we warn people about. Like, if you listen to the show and you had Aaron Jones on your team and you deployed Aaron Jones last week, hoping that he was going to get you over that hump and lock in that playoff spot for you, I'm almost to the point, Mark, where my heart is black and cold. Like, I don't feel bad for you. We told you that Aaron Jones is a trap. It's time to sell Aaron Jones. And you didn't listen. So if you didn't listen about Aaron Jones, hate to say we told you so.
It really isn't a RotoBros fantasy football podcast without a RotoBros fantasy football victory lap. I love it.
Right.
I'm here for it. You gotta take
them. It's 2019 for us, right?
You really do love to see it.
Chris Godwin and Mike Evans, they decided to do a little tag team and disappoint a lot of people. So they didn't do anything. Neither did Jameis. A lot of people were deploying Jameis Winston out there. But look, those are still 3 guys. We talked about guys that we're confident in deploying this week, like Tyler. Like I'm confident in that trio. I'm still deploying Jameis and Godwin and Evans if I have those guys. I've got Evans in numerous leagues. He's not seeing my bench. I think he's another guy that's due for a big game. Kittle, Henry, and Ertz, the big trio of wide receivers there. Obviously, Evan Ingram's hurt, so can't name him in there. Travis Kelce's still pretty much, doing his thing for the most part. But Kittle, Henry, Hunter Henry, and Zach Ertz, where were they at?
Well, I can explain where all the Kansas City Chiefs were at. They were just pounding Oakland into the dirt, and it was windy. It was like insanely windy. You will hear me say all the time, rain does not concern me. Wind concerns me. Like when winds get up over 25 miles per hour, there have been studies on this. Passer rating and yards per attempt all plummet when the wind is over 25 miles per hour.
Yeah, that's something that people. That's something, especially now. We're in the month of December. Obviously, there's going to be a lot more cold weather and bad weather and rain and snow and wind and all that. And I think that's something we need to cover just real quick. Guys, listen. Do not panic on your offensive players. Do not allow weather to be the deciding factor for who you're going to start and who you're going to sit if it's rainy and snowy or snowy. Because rain and snow does not affect players' performance as much as people think it does. No,
these guys know how to play in weather like that. There is no way to be good at playing in the wind. There's just no way to do it.
Yes, wind and mud is where you really have a problem. And you're not going to see too many muddy games. It's not, I wouldn't say, I guess it's rare, but it's pretty much, it's even more rare than a snowy game or super muddy game. Just doesn't happen very often. But you will see it. And that's where you want to sort of downgrade your guys. Like that's those muddy conditions and windy conditions. That's good for the defense. For the offense, it's actually good in the rain and the snow because they know where they're going. The receivers and the running backs and the offense, they know their blocking assignments. They know their routes. They know where they're going with the football. So they have an easier way they have an easier pathway to get open. Defenders are just sitting there left guessing and having to make these tough cuts in this, these bad environments. So the offense knows where they're going. So keep in mind, guys, like don't let weather. I know people like to check the weather report. Don't let oh my God, it's supposed to be pouring down rain. Don't allow that to be the factor in whether or not you're going to bench a guy. Like I know there was a lot of people that were benching Sterling Shepard this week because it was raining. Okay, why?
Well, it was snowing and there was really no wind concern. It was just the snow. And I mean, you saw what Aaron Rodgers did. Aaron Rodgers went freaking nuclear. It's these guys know how to play in this element. There is a way to train to practice playing in precipitation. You can practice that. You can't practice how to play in the wind. There's just no way to do it.
You can't. You got to be bringing out some turbines out there. So guys, just a quick don't allow rain and snow to affect your lineup decisions. Mud and wind is what needs to affect your lineup decisions. Okay, but yeah, getting back to guys who blew it for some owners. Who are some names that for you that blew it for some guys? Because obviously there's a lot of people that just want to rant right now because of guys like Michael Thomas, Aaron Jones, Godwin, Evans, Kittle, Henry Ertz, all those guys.
Well, some of my teams that didn't make the playoffs that were good. One of my guys that really didn't do what I hoped he would is Amari Cooper. It was a bad run. It was a bad run. He's seen the same target share as Michael Gallup and less air yards than Michael Gallup over the last month or so, over the last 5 weeks. It's been a rough run. He's been hurt. And he was a guy that I had a lot of. He's one of my most highest owned best ball receivers. And people are so sick of hearing me talk about my best ball teams. And it's like, that's my game. I live for the draft process. Honestly, messing around with waiver wires, is it a talent? Yes. Do I have the foresight to be good at managing the waiver wire? I think everyone that's listening to this podcast knows I do. I just love the draft process. And I love the element of best ball where if a guy gets hurt or a guy busts, you're screwed. You're stuck with him. So people that call it like, oh, it's fantasy football in easy mode. No, it's not. You have to be a good drafter. And if you're not a good drafter, but you're somebody that is very good at working the waiver wire and making trades, that's a lot of people. That is a lot of people that play fantasy football, but they would not be good at best ball. I would smoke them in best ball. Chris would probably smoke them. Chris kind of sucks.
Okay, probably not me. Best ball is definitely not my game, but it is fun. I do enjoy it for sure, especially for the draft aspect. Okay, so those are some guys that blew it for some owners. Some guys that helped you get into the playoffs. Mark, I got a story. So my work league, okay, they play it on ESPN. You know, I'm not a huge ESPN platform. Obviously, I'm still putting Mark to sleep. So yeah, story time, so I can put Mark to sleep and have the rest of the podcast to myself. So in my work league, I am, it starts off pretty good. Okay. Starts off very nice. Carson Wentz, has a good game that I deploy. It was either him or Baker Mayfield. And I was like, you know what? I'm trusting my guy. I said it on the podcast. Carson Wentz is a guy that could end up being a league winner at quarterback along with Sam Darnold. And lo and behold, there we go. He lit up Miami. So I'm sitting there and all of a sudden my opponent's got, she's got Travis Kelce. She's got Todd Gurley and Daniel Jones, and Calvin Ridley is really what killed me the most. But Calvin Ridley and Kareem Hunt and Todd Gurley, those were the trio that really killed me. John Brown didn't do me any favors throwing a damn touchdown pass.
That was awesome. That play was awesome.
It was awesome, but I didn't enjoy it because I had to win to make the playoffs, and I was nervous. I was down going into Monday night, Mark. I needed 10 points from DK Metcalf. And my Lord and Savior, DK Metcalf, comes through with 11.5. And I won the matchup by 1 point. I'm in the playoffs in my work league. I am beyond stoked. I'm the 5 seed, so I would have been going home. I would be on the couch right now, and depressed because I didn't make the playoffs in my work league. All right, I got bounced, but DK came through for me. Hallelujah.
I do have some questions for you. Question. Are we playing Miami Dolphins in the fantasy football playoffs? Because there's a Miami Dolphin now that played 60% of the snaps last week. Kalen Ballage is on IR. He has been the darling of DFS Twitter over the past 3 weeks or so.
You are playing one Miami Dolphin, and I bet people never thought they'd hear me say it.
No, Devontae Parker, yeah, I think you're playing him. He's a borderline wide receiver 1, but okay, so let's say you're in a pinch at running back. You would not play Patrick Laird at all. 5 targets, played 60% of the snaps last week. Kalen Ballage is on IR.
How much of a pinch are we talking here? Like, I mean, am I having to choose between him and like Ronald Jones or Peyton Barber? Okay, yes. Maybe. But if I've got Carlos Hyde or like Kareem Hunt or
I'd
Kenyon
play Patrick
Drake,
Laird over Carlos Hyde.
I'm taking Carlos Hyde, guys like Kenyon Drake, Kareem Hunt.
Duke Johnson outsnapped him against the Patriots, and they were trailing the whole game, or they were leading the whole game.
Duke Johnson, I would play over,
Duke Johnson.
But I get the process over Patrick Laird. I get it, and I think he could be a fine football player. I think he is a fine football player.
I'd lose my mind if he ends up being a league winner. I will lose my freaking mind.
I wouldn't go that far. I don't think that running game is really going to do a whole lot these fantasy playoffs. But I think Parker, you know what? I take it back. If you are any pinch at tight end, Mike Gesicki is a guy that you could do a lot worse than. I think Gesicki is starting to develop into what we thought he was going to be coming out of Penn State. And I'm telling you, Mark, this offense could be very, very good next year with the right play caller and the right quarterback. I'm telling you, the arrow's pointing up, in my opinion, for the Miami Dolphins. Preston Williams coming back. Are you kidding me?
Gesicki seen 32 targets, 17% target share, 21% of the team's air yards, caught 2 touchdowns over the last 5 games, or last 5 weeks anyway. I'm with you. I mean, Gesicki's a dynasty buy, correct? I'd love the idea of buying Mike Gesicki.
Sure, absolutely.
All right. Well, we're talking about the Dolphins. We're selling Devontae Parker in dynasty, right?
100%.
Yeah, you just got a sell window. You're selling. Like, there is no reason to hang on to Devontae Parker. We know what he is. He is being force-fed the football in fast-paced games with a quarterback who all he does is just chuck the ball downfield.
And at this point, I think Devontae Parker could have bad game to finish the season. and you would still be able to get a solid return for him in a dynasty league. After the
I agree
season.
with you.
I think at this he has done enough, and he was so impressive last week to where I think that is going to carry him into the offseason, and you're going to be able to get a lot more for him than you ever thought you would. So I completely agree with you there. How many more players over the last 5 weeks have more air yards than Devontae Parker?
Mike Evans, DJ Moore, and John Brown. That's it. That's the list.
That's pretty surprising. Hats off to Parker. I'm still not a huge believer. He was a great talent coming out of Louisville. Amazing talent coming out of Louisville. Yeah. It just took him some time. So I don't know. Maybe he's getting it together. We'll see. We'll see.
It's usage. It's usage. 47 targets, 553 air yards. If you're a dynasty owner, you are selling him in dynasty. This is easy.
I think Preston Williams taught him a thing or two. Taught him how to do a few things.
Knock it off. Season.
Okay, so a couple other guys though that helped some people get into the playoffs. David Montgomery came out of nowhere, had a pretty solid game. Kareem Hunt, I just mentioned him. He helped my opponent almost beat me. Luckily, that did not happen. Kareem Hunt, Courtland Sutton is turning into obviously an alpha number 1 wide receiver. He's another guy in that DJ Moore category whose stock is just going to skyrocket next year. And then Allen Robinson on Thursday had an amazing game as well. He was very solid. He helped me. He was one of my bright spots for that work league I was just telling you about.
You mentioned Courtland Sutton, and now it's got me thinking. Phillip Lindsay, can we start him in the playoffs?
Sure. I love his matchup this week. I mean, it depends on who your options are. But look, Phillip Lindsay's getting more usage. They have finally realized, thankfully, who their best player in that backfield is, and it's Phillip Lindsay. Haven't. Oh, yes, they have, Mark.
No, they haven't. I agree with you. Phillip Lindsay is the better player. I'm telling you that no, they haven't realized it.
Look at
the usage. Look at the usage. Royce Freeman has played more than 50% of the snaps twice over the last 4 games.
I still think he's a great play. I'm not going to be worried about Royce. I think Phillip Lindsay is the guy to own, obviously, in that backfield. And I think I'm safe with starting. I'm starting him in a couple places, but I'm not starting him over,
played 43% of the snaps in week 13. That's gross.
Well, perhaps it was game script. I have no idea. I don't know. But like, if it's between like him and Austin Eckler, I'll go with the floor with Austin Eckler, the receiving floor, obviously. But if it's like between him and Devontae Freeman or Kenyon Drake or Tevin Coleman, I'm going to go with Phillip Lindsay. So yeah, I think you can play him.
Would you start Melvin Gordon in the playoffs?
I guess I would, because if I have him, I probably have to start him. But I'm not like thrilled about it.
Yeah, last 3 games, 52.5. 62.3 and 65.2% of the snaps. Austin Eckler still has a floor of about 45.5% of the snaps.
Exactly.
So, I'm with you on Austin Eckler.
Yeah, exactly.
And he's a guy that is probably on a lot of fantasy playoff teams, because if you had him to start the year, you probably started the season like 5-0.
Oh God, he was like an RB3. Like he was a top 3 running back to start the year. He's still a top 10 running back, I think, at this point. So guys, I want to get to a point that I kind of like to make a little bit before we jump off here. It's important. The playoffs are important. Okay. Now, Marcus, I think, plays a little bit more loose on this than he's not as strict on this.
I prefer the term aggressive.
Yeah, I guess he's a little more aggressive than I am on here. I want to play a little more safe. Again, I always say it, I'm a man of consistency. So I want those guaranteed points. My advice would be to not get too cute in the playoffs. People hear me say it all the time. For me, it's not DFS. It is season long. And in my opinion, you have to play those differently, especially when it's playoff time. Trust your players. And what I mean by that is trust your guys like Tyler Lockett. Trust your guys like Cooper Kupp, who are coming off ruts. Mike Evans, who has had a couple down weeks. Trust those guys in the playoffs. You drafted them where you drafted them for a reason. These are guys that have gotten you to where you are for a reason. Trust them, and I think they're going to come through for you. Now, having said that, there's a little bit of gray area, and here's the gray area. Odell Beckham is not a stud this year. He is not one of your guys. You don't have to start him based on name value. David Johnson, you don't start him based on name value. David Johnson is a drop candidate in redraft right now. That's how bad he's been. These are examples of guys that don't look at the name value. Look at what they are putting on the field. So you're not going to go out there and start Odell Beckham this week. I don't care if it's against Cincinnati over Courtland Sutton, right? You're starting Courtland Sutton. I'm not.
I would start OBJ. Look at the usage. OBJ's usage is so much more favorable than Courtland Sutton's.
This is the aggressiveness that we were just talking about.
This is not aggressive. You playing Courtland Sutton over OBJ is the aggressive move.
I'm playing the better fantasy player the last few weeks.
Courtland Sutton saw 5 targets with Drew Lock under center. He's got a rookie quarterback in his second game as an NFL pro.
What's he doing with him?
Whereas OBJ has Baker Mayfield and is seeing crazy usage. How is OBJ not the play here?
What are they doing with the targets?
And that's fine. And that's fine. But how is OBJ not the safer play here? 42 targets, 41% of the air yards over the last 5 games. How is OBJ not the safer play here?
Because he hasn't been the safer play all season long.
He's seen 11 more targets than Courtland Sutton. He's seen 11 more targets than Courtland Sutton over the last 5 weeks. He doesn't have a rookie quarterback playing for him.
And he's not doing anything with him.
Yes, he is. He's not producing elite numbers, but you can't say he's busting.
He has been a fantasy bust this year. There's no question about it.
He's been a fantasy bust in the sense that he was a first or second round pick, but I'm telling you right now, over the last 5 games, his usage has been fine. His floor has been fine. He has not been like this awful player. Like he's still 12, 10, and 8 targets. I am completely comfortable with that. I would rather take all of that over 5 Drew Lock targets.
I am stunned that you are telling me like Baker Mayfield's been much better.
Baker Mayfield is so much better than Drew Lock. I'm not having this conversation.
Baker Mayfield has been garbage this season. Now, look, I get it. He might be a better.
He hasn't really been garbage in like 6 weeks, so that's old. We can be done with that. He hasn't been garbage in like a month and a half.
Courtland Sutton has been more consistent than Odell Beckham Jr. has this year. He has been more consistent the last several games, and he is playing a defense, okay, that is 25th in the league in fantasy points given up to opposing wide receivers. I am all over Courtland Sutton. I'm all over him. Now, look, I'm not saying OBJ's a bad play, but if you're asking me who I trust more, yeah, I trust the guy that's actually getting it done right now over a guy like OBJ. I'm trusting. Let me put this. I have in a dynasty league. I have Jarvis Landry and Odell Beckham. Guess which one is on the bench this week? It's Odell Beckham Jr. Jarvis Landry's got the higher floor. No, you play Jarvis over OBJ. Courtland Sutton right now has the higher floor.
You play Jarvis over OBJ. I agree with that. I'm talking about Courtland Sutton.
At least we agree there.
Courtland, who saw 5 targets with Drew Lock at the helm and caught 2 touchdowns. Is he going to catch 2 touchdowns again? Like, what is his stat line without the 2 touchdowns? That's all I'm saying. I am going with OBJ's usage every time. He's got 5 games this year with double-digit targets. Courtland Sutton has not seen double-digit targets in a game once. That's all I'm saying. This is going to be
an interesting. We're going to post a poll in FSA. This is going to be an awesome debate. This is actually a really good question. I'm actually surprised you're choosing OBJ here. I understand the process. I get it, but I'm just surprised you're taking OBJ here. But
I follow the usage. We're going to come back to this. The usage. That's how I am.
This is going to be another thing. Tyler Lockett versus who was it? Who was our bet? Our gentleman's agreement?
It was Tyler Lockett versus, I don't know. We're going to have to go back and listen to the show.
We're a short-term memory loss for the RotoBros tonight.
It was Robert Woods. It was Robert Woods.
Robert Woods. Yeah. Tyler Lockett, versus Robert Woods, and then Courtland Sutton versus OBJ. We'll see who wins those next week on the show. So that'll be fun to look forward to.
Yeah, but the thing is, if OBJ sees 12 targets and Courtland Sutton sees 6, but Courtland Sutton catches 2 more touchdowns, I'm not going to take an L.
Give me 3 names of the best round 1 playoff plays. Obviously, not the obvious names, but three guys, 3 of your favorite ones that you think are the best plays for week 1 or for the fantasy playoffs in week 1.
Like just overall.
Overall, yeah. Obviously, like, again, not obvious players, not, Christian McCaffrey, but guys that could be surprising, round 1 winners for a lot of owners.
I haven't really thought about that yet. That's a tough one. I think Stephon Diggs is interesting against the Lions at home. I really don't think that we're going to see one of those 10 pass attempt Kirk Cousins games. This team has found an identity, and it's a healthy balance between running and passing. It's not all running and it's not all passing. They've really found an identity, and I like Stephon Diggs a lot. I'll tell you what, I like Diggs more if Adam Thielen comes back.
I could agree with that. And I like Kyle Rudolph a lot less, obviously, if Thielen comes back. You and I mentioned why last week. But Rudolph is a guy that I love if Thielen sits again, because we're seeing his usage. Another tight end that I like, that we're in love with now that Eric Ebron is hurt, is Jack Doyle. Jack Doyle, I think that's actually pretty obvious, to be honest with you, against Tampa. So he's a great play this week. A couple of the names that I have, Mark. Tyler Boyd against the Browns. I think, obviously, Andy Dalton coming back has been a great thing for him. Benny Snell. If James Conner, it doesn't look like James Conner's going to play, but if James Conner does in fact sit, Benny Snell is in an absolutely phenomenal position this week to be inserted as a flex option in your fantasy lineup. He is going up against the Cardinals defense that is 24th in the league in yards given up for opposing running backs and 28th in the league in fantasy points. So this is really a great situation for Benny Snell. And a couple other names we mentioned: Carson Wentz, Sam Darnold. Carson Wentz playing the Giants on Monday night, and Sam Darnold playing Miami. Those are two quarterbacks that I think are definitely going to win people playoff games in round one coming up here.
Oh, I got one. All right, here. I got one more play for you guys as far as like playoff round one of the playoffs plays, and that'll be it for me. Ryan Tannehill against the Raiders.
Ooh, I like it.
Hold on a second. Hold on. Let me consult my data. Hold on a second. Oh, the Raiders are sixth worst in the NFL in yards per pass attempt allowed, and they're bottom 5 in the NFL in explosive pass rate allowed. Ryan Tannehill, I believe, is still leading the NFL in yards per pass attempt,
which is insane. The Titans are making the playoffs, and I think they're going to make victims out of the Raiders this week. So I really like that choice.
We can talk about it. Yeah, we can talk about Derrick Henry all we want, but at the end of the day, I mean, how good has Ryan Tannehill been?
He's definitely been a spark, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Guys, it is that time of the show where we got to kick it over to the producer man to see what all we got wrong. Producer man, what you got for us, buddy?
For what it's worth, Ryan Tannehill leads the NFL in yards per pass attempt with 9.1.
Wrong. Taysom Hill leads the league in yards per attempt with 11.7 on 3 attempts. No, I'm just playing. But seriously, we do have some things to go over here. Number 1, Austin Eckler is not just a top 10 back. He is the number 3 running back in PPR at this point. Then we got to get into this Courtland Sutton, Odell Beckham thing, because the usage argument is a little flimsy. Courtland Sutton is averaging 7.5 targets per game and 113.7 air yards per game over the last 5 weeks. His ADOT is 15.2. His air yards market share is 0.46. Odell Beckham, on the other hand, is averaging 8.4 targets per game. That's more, obviously, but he only has 110 air yards per game, a 13.1 ADOT, and a 41% air yards market share. It's a lot closer than you're making it sound, Mark. The other thing on that discussion, Houston is 21st in points per game allowed to wide receivers. Other than that, great show, gentlemen. A lot of good stuff in this one.
Thank you very much, producer man. Thank you so much for that. We appreciate it as always. Hey, Mark, tell everybody before we sign off here, tell everybody where they can find you.
You're going to find me on Twitter at Mark Wemken. That's MarkWemken. You're also going to find me at the Quant Edge every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. Every Tuesday, Snaps and Targets. Every Thursday, Injury Impact. And then I've got some DFS slate breakdowns for you on the weekend. You guys don't want to miss it. Make sure you're checking it out, guys.
You can find me on Twitter at Mind of McConnell. You can also find both of us, as always, year round on Facebook at the fantasy group FSA, Fantasy Sports Advice and Analysis, the largest, most active fantasy sports community on the planet. Go to Facebook tonight, right now, as soon as you're listening to this, and type in FSA Fantasy. Join the group today. You will not regret it. Guys, we really appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out with us for the last hour or so. You guys are wonderful. We love you. Best of luck week 1 in the playoffs. We hope that some of the information tonight will help lead you to a victory. We'll check in with you guys next week before we get settled in for round 2. Go get that hardware. We love you guys. Best of luck this week. And as always, keep balling, baby.